Hello, I'm Candid Frank Stanisci of CFL Talk. Welcome and thank you for being here and watching here the Spanglish World Network on Zingo TV channel 250. Please remember to download the Zingo TV app at the respective app stores for iOS and Android devices. While you download the app, make sure you rate and leave a comment. Both apps are absolutely free. Zingo TV is available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire TV sticks, Roku sticks, and also on all smart TVs 2016 forward. Don't forget to subscribe to Candid Frank Stanisci 1030 on YouTube. All right, David Morassutti, this is it. The end of the season has arrived, buddy.
It's always tough. Always tough when you know that there's not another CFL game being played the following week.
It really did go quickly. So let's start by where it was played. The 2020 411th Grey Cup was played at BC Place in Vancouver. It was my first time in Vancouver. I was amazed by the city. I was amazed by the Rockies. I was amazed by the Pacific Ocean and the beauty once the sun got up. But I'll tell you, we were told it rained a lot this time of year in Vancouver, and they didn't lie. They didn't lie. It was very rainy. We saw the snow-capped mounts, I think, once in the time that we were there, the 6 days we were there.
Yeah. Right after the cloud, it was a day where there was
Friday.
just no rain.
Friday.
Yeah. It was a Friday, right? I mean, it's a beautiful place. I've always heard great things about the city. Unfortunately, when you go there for a working trip, it's not exactly like, oh, did you get a chance to go and explore?
We did the best we could on the last day.
Yeah, exactly. Not easy to do when you're running around, for sure.
Well, what we can say that, and just to ensure that people understand this, it was a place that I'm very interested in going back to see and spend a little more time and get to understand what's there other than the inside of BC Place.
Yeah, I know, right? And so anyone going to Vancouver in November, bring a jacket.
Bring a raincoat, jacket, and an umbrella. Now, the CFL was kind enough in the care package. I call it the care package, or the gift package that they give us. You got the usual socks and some other stuff, a hat. But I was joking with you on the airplane. I said, maybe they'll give us a slicker this year. And it came close. They gave us an umbrella. And it was it was a well-founded decision. Let me tell you, I mean, they knew what they were doing when they threw that umbrella in there. So now I have a Grey Cup umbrella.
Yeah. Yeah. So we got that covered. The next time we go to a game in BC, we have our umbrella at least.
Or we can re-gift it to somebody that we care about and think that needs an umbrella.
Mm-hmm.
There's that too. All right. So it was in Vancouver. It was in BC Place. The Jonas Brothers were the halftime act. What'd you think of them?
Oh, I thought they're a great halftime act. What I liked especially is they appealed to a different audience. And a lot of times when you do these halftime acts, you kind of want to you're trying to do something different. You're also trying to appeal to an audience that maybe wants an extra reason to pay a little more money to go to a Grey Cup, right? When I talk to some fans and they talk about how much the tickets are and things like that, I'm like, so you don't want a Grey Cup, like a decent halftime act? You just want a normal football game? You can pay normal football prices, but you're gonna not get the experience of a Grey Cup. Like, that's what you pay for. You pay for star attraction. Jonas Brothers are a star attraction. The number of media members that came to the press conference that they did, like, that too was just very important for the CFL to get an act like that, because last year's was good. Green Day was good. The year before that, they fell flat on their face with the halftime act. It just did not appeal to really anybody. So I give them credit. This is 2 years in a row. I felt like they've done a good job with the halftime show.
Now, you might have noticed, folks, sneaking in on the screen, Griff Bourdignon. Griff is an NFL connoisseur and broadcaster, a podcaster, but he also does the Canadian Football League, and we consider him a friend. And we wished he could have come to the Grey Cup, but he had other things to do. But what he can offer to us is what it was like, and he came in perfect timing. We talked about the location, BC Place. We talked about the rain. We just started talking about the Jonas Brothers, and you can tell us from a television viewer perspective what it was like. We were in the stadium, and I was watching from the press box. I may not be be able to relay what it was like the whole game. Anyway, I've seen most of the game on the recording I have. But what was it like watching it on television?
So before we get started with anything else, I just want to say I think I have appropriate shirt on today. Uh,
What's
Oh,
that?
very good.
yeah, from the new Turf Traditions collection, I got this a toque and then a hoodie. But from a television perspective, the halftime show was, and I say this too because we have Thanksgiving in the NFL coming up next week. The halftime shows are made for television. They're not made for the people that are in the stadium because they know that. I've also heard reports too from Vancouver that there was girls who attended the game just to see the Jonas Brothers. Kind of like how when Amar when he brought in 50 Cent earlier this year, the stadium was half empty by halftime. But it's just a matter of it. Because I saw it was some people complaining on the stadium that like, oh, we can't see, we can't do any of this. But from a television perspective, I give all props to TSN. They put on a great production. Rod Smith and Glenn Suter in the booth were really good as well. But from like even the game itself, from an overall television perspective, it was great as well. Um, One thing also got to give props to is Matthew Shinetti and Claire Hanna, who after the game, it was just boom, 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 getting all the interviews with various Argonaut players. And then they, because for the game, just for context, it was Matthew was following the Argonauts and Claire was with the Bombers. So just the fact they got them all there and very composed and everything like that. The television production aspect of the CFL has really been good with TSN CTV, and that's the other thing now too with it being on CTV. It's so great. But from a television standpoint, I don't have any complaints because that was the first not true game I watched on TV this year, but it was just interesting because obviously last year I was in Hamilton with you guys, and this year being at home, it was two different perspectives.
So, and also, I'd like to know, just if I will go back a little bit. The other thing was that the Jonas Brothers, as we said, Prince Harry reminded us of the Invictus Games.
Yes.
He was there as well. So there's a little bit of promotion within BC because BC is hosting the Invictus. Vancouver's hosting the Invictus Games as well. That's for, you know, something I care about as a member of a legion. Those are a lot of them are veterans who basically are amputees and other injuries that they received, an opportunity for them to take part in sports. I think that's awesome too. Good for Prince Harry and good for the Invictus Games. And it's something that Canadians are we're initiators of that event. So good for them.
Yeah, it's I've the Invictus Games. They were in Toronto in 2017. I was covering it when I was in school. It's an incredible, you know what? It's an incredible week. I think it's a week long, but it's an incredible event.
It is.
You know, people whose lives have changed for situations beyond their control, and these games give them a chance to have a little bit of glory in their life too, like competing. I remember just going to the weightlifting and like incredible feats of athleticism for that. And wheelchair tennis was another one I did. I went to check out the archery. Like there's just some great events. It's like hosting the the Olympics.
It is.
In a lot of ways. It's gonna be great. BC's gonna be great for it, and having someone with Prince Harry's notoriety behind it also helps too.
Just to ensure that we have all the information, it carries on from February 8th to the 16th in 2025. It follows the Olympics in that same window, that same Winter Olympics window. And this year they're going to have some Winter Olympics events as well, which is a little bit of a change. So it's really great that that's going on. We're here to talk about football, so we'll go to that. I guess we can start by second guessing ourselves. We did it on your show, Griff.
Yep.
About how this game would go. It pretty much. This sounds terrible. It sounds like I'm patting ourselves on the back, but in a way, we talked about the lack of predictability in the game. That it wouldn't be predictable. And in fact, the opposite became true as far as the template for winning is concerned. The template that I think we all agreed on. And
Yep.
David, you went to extremes writing about it and letting your people know what you thought. It was all about, if the Argos, for me anyway, it was all about the three phases contributing equally and their quarterback not making mistakes. That's what it boiled down to me before when we did your show, Griff, and that pretty much is what played out.
You needed this game to be for the Argos to win this game. It couldn't rely on one person being the hero. It's not the way this team does it. It's about contributions from all around. And I do think that, you watched this game and you watched where Winnipeg was faltering and where the Argos were thriving. Winnipeg put the ball in Zach Claros' hands and told him to go and win the game. Even when he couldn't even throw it with his hand, with his finger cut the way it was. They didn't rely on Brady Oliveira like they were the whole year. Their defense was getting jobs done, but their special teams were lacking, right? And that was a problem all year for a special teams centric coach like Mike O'Shea was, when considering his background. The special teams didn't really do anything to push, to give Winnipeg an edge. They kind of conceded that the Argos were going to beat them on special teams. Defensively, yes. Defensively, the Winnipeg defense did their job to make that a close game. But the offense is where they really got let down. It was the lack of balance on offense. The Argos realized we need to get everyone involved. We're going to have to make Winnipeg. Everyone talks about Winnipeg's defense being so good, Ryan Dinwiddie drew up a great game plan to go after that defense, which is you can go and cover Coxie, you can go cover a Mackay Polk. We're going to beat you with our other guys on top of that. That's what they did. That's the true element of a team win rather than relying on a few individuals.
Textbook, Griff. Stop the running game. You hurt the passing game.
Yeah. We almost saw a similar game plan last year with the Montreal Alouettes, if you kind of think about it, where I know Montreal won it at the buzzer, and it wasn't this game is obviously more of a blowout, but if you think about it, the blueprint to be drawn was interesting. I was talking with some people about this at the rally on Tuesday as well. And I said this on Twitter, and it got some traction, and I know Arbuckle won MVP, but there was a very solid case for Winton to win the award as well.
Absolutely.
And I think if Winnipeg had won, without a doubt, it was going to be Willie Jefferson, he was the best player on the field for 4 quarters for the Blue Bombers. So here's the other thing too, like it's the question now for Winnipeg. I know everyone talks about like, oh, what are they going to do personnel wise? What are you going to do with coaching? It's like Buck Pierce's name's now being floated with the BC Lions, which I'm assuming we'll talk about. And Jordan Younger as well. You assume he may want a sniff at an opportunity too, to where it's like, and even with Younger as well, I don't know how the defense went from dominating the Roughriders in the way they did to letting the Argos score 41. Sure, 7 of those points was a pick 6, but even like stuff like the Kevin McTall touchdown, the Dejan Brissett touchdown, letting Winton McManus get down to the 5, but then the Kadeem Carey just last time we're going to use this season, carrying it into the end zone. Ryan Dinwiddie and Mike Miller really, and Pete Costanza as well, I feel like a very unsung hero with this team, really know how to get these guys going. The unity, that's the thing with the Argos. That's what I've noticed in my 2 years with them, with you guys. There's a brotherhood and a unity to that team that just seems like you can't break it. And sure, last year they had a very bad day against Montreal. And I know everyone's talking about, oh, Winnipeg's dynasty. There's no dynasty there. For all we know, we're here having the same conversation next year, and Toronto's starting a dynasty of their own.
Yeah, so to clarify, Miller is the quarterback coach, Costanza is the receivers coach.
Yes.
And then you have two defensive coordinators that share the responsibility with the Argos.
Kevin Iben, and I'm blanking on who the other guy
Will
is.
Fields.
Yes.
Fields.
David? It was a complete team effort. Even to Mickey Donovan, special teams coordinator as well. Like, it's just coaching. It truly shows you if you have good coaching, they'll lead you there, and that everyone buys into what Ryan Dinwiddie's selling them.
When you talk about the word dynasty, like if the Argos had made the Grey Cup last year, I would for sure be calling this a dynasty. I think they would say we need to get here consistently. With Winnipeg, they've owned the West. That's what makes them a dynasty in the West. It's not a championship dynasty. It's almost like the Buffalo Bills dynasty, where just no one was beating them and they were getting to the game, but then they were losing, right? It is impressive though. Like we were looking back, a team hasn't lost 3 straight Grey Cups since the 50s.
Yeah.
When Winnipeg did it.
Coincidentally.
Right? So I know a lot of Blue Bombers fans are. I mean, we saw quite a few of them, Frank, at our hotel. They were, heads down and things like that. But it could be worse. It could be a team that doesn't get there. Like Toronto, the difference with Toronto now, you can imagine them getting them every year.
Yep.
Back when they were winning, it was, will they make it back the following year? Do they have the core to get there each and every year? Because there's always so much turnover. 2017, after they won that championship, that team was almost unrecognizable.
And, dynasty implies invincibility in my mind. Like when you say dynasty, I think invincibility, a level of invincibility, and that's not something that the Bombers had. The fact now, if they had won this one, I think a dynasty still could have been in there. You're winning through 3 and being in 5, that would have been more. But the problem is here, the number is they won 2 out of 5. So, they weren't invincible by any stretch of the imagination. And in that sense, they aren't a dynasty. But that doesn't mean they weren't a great team in these past. They were the best team in the last 5 years. But they weren't a dynasty because they weren't invincible in any way.
Exactly. That's exactly it. Because in the biggest stages, there was cracks in the armor that got exposed. Like everyone remembers Enoch Mwamba's performance in 22. You remember what Cody Fajardo was able to do last year. You saw this year, not just what Nick Arbuckle was able to do in a role where, look, and also I'll say this too, the fun thing as well, the last 3 Grey Cups as well from a gambling perspective, all three winners were massive underdogs of at least plus 180 or more. I know when that was Toronto's odds in 22. Last year, I think it was like 200 or 2 something for Montreal. This year, I bet the Argos at plus 320 because we all know this. When the Argos are, and here's the weird thing with them this year, they were 2-5 against teams that didn't make the playoffs. They basically wiped the floor with a lot of the teams that were good. Think about it. They swept Winnipeg. They beat Montreal in 2-3. It's just funny how things like that work, and that's what makes the CFL so fun and interesting and even quirky is the fact of the parity. Every year you don't know who's going to be there.
I don't know, David. My big story is quarterbacking, and you guys touched on it. And for me, the big thing is that Ryan Dinwiddie had faith in his quarterback room. He could point this year to any guy in that room and say, I want you to go out there and you're going to carry this team to victory. And he could say it full-throated and with sincerity. He did the same thing when he said, the first 9 games, okay, kid, go out there. Dukes was sent out there and he did pretty good. Then Arbuckle at the Grey Cup. And of course he had his number 1 guy played the last 9 games. Well, not all 9, but he played pretty much the end of the season, the last half of the season, and proved that he was of MVP caliber. But Ryan Dinwiddie didn't hesitate, David, the whole time we were there. Every time the subject of Arbuckle, how do you feel it? He was full-throated. I have all the faith in the world in him. And I think the difference in this game was, unfortunately, the Winnipeg Blue Bomber coach didn't have as much faith in his quarterback room that showed up in that game. And I think that was the difference.
Well, they say the adversity carried them, and it did, right? Like no team had to rely on their backups more than Toronto did to get them there. Zach Claros, technically Winnipeg was down to their 3rd quarterback with Strevler out, and I don't know about you. Like the problem is that Winnipeg needed to win the final game just to finish first in the West. Mm-hmm. Usually that's the time where you at least get your backup some reps. And it just shows that if you don't plan for it, you're going to fail, right? They didn't plan on Zach Claros coming out of that game. It's obvious with the way that they tried to make it seem like they weren't going to be obvious with the play calling, and that's why they had the ball in Terry Wilson's hands when they're in the red zone rather than give it to Brady Oliveira. But they played it right into the Argos' hands with it. Let Terry Wilson throw it.
Like even Kenny Lawler too. He only had 1 catch the entire game. There's one game with the Argos I actually want to go back to from earlier this year. The game against Hamilton, they lost on the Leggio field goal at the buzzer. Because if you remember last year, that's the game that Toronto won in Montreal with Boris Beattie. This year, they lose that game. And ever since that game, they were just full throttle ahead. They went into Winnipeg and took care of business, beat Montreal at home. There was that beautiful Saturday afternoon game against Ottawa that got them the East semifinal win. But the best thing I liked about that loss was, I know, Frank, you weren't at the game, but David and I were there. Remember how when the game against Hamilton that they lost? The Legio field goal. Remember how Winton and Tavares handled themselves in the locker room postgame and how it was somber, but they just knew, hey, it's on to the next one. That's the thing with Toronto. Toronto's available. The Argonauts are kind of like a chameleon if you think about it. They're able to adapt to any situation that gets thrown at them. Meanwhile, Winnipeg, it's just, here's our guys. We're going to go down with this. That's what happened. They went down in a blaze of glory.
Yeah, David, it starts at the head coach. Ryan Dinwiddie is a team-first coach.
Yep.
He's not afraid to replace anybody. And I'll add this little caveat into the conversation. Remember, Arbuckle's the guy that Dinwiddie said, okay, let's trade him. We'll get Kelly. We'll use the pick to get Kelly. And he let Arbuckle go. And he brought him back. You know, there's something to be said for the loyalty that he has and the way he leads the quarterback room. I know Miller deserves most of the does most of the heavy lifting. I get that. But I think it has a lot to do with Arbuckle, that he has faith in all his players that he has on the team. And even if he doesn't let up that he does, which is, I think, is one of his strengths.
Well, the thing is Dinwiddie puts in an amazing amount of effort in preparing. Right? We heard Pinball talk about it at the parade, right? He's there every day. I know that he spends a lot of time, and there was a point in time where you wondered if that was gonna get to him, right? Putting in so much time and being in the office so much, eventually it starts to wear on a coach. But he, it just means that, you know, your team is better off because they're so prepared for it. I mean, that's why the Argos have thrived so long, is because Dinwiddie puts in the effort, and there's that symmetry between him and the front office. We've seen it now. I mean, more so than we've really come to understand it before, how much he plays into the players that are brought in.
We were reminded by Pinball that during the pandemic, when the season was eliminated, Ryan Dinwiddie still went into the office every day. And when I spoke to him about at that time, mask and all, I asked him, so what do you do then if you're going in there? He goes, I'm watching the NFL games, seeing if I could pick anything up. So he was doing his homework. He couldn't watch CFL games. So Buddy decided, hey, I'm going to watch the NFL and see what they're doing. And he just constantly thinking about the game, to your point, David.
Well, and the other thing too is that because he's playing, like when Chad was suspended, we need a veteran. Let's go get Nick Arbuckle. That was Dinwiddie.
That's right.
Right. So it's faith in knowing your game plan and not trying to throw it out the window, right? You constantly heard him throw out the year. Maybe we need to change the playbook. Maybe we need to shorten. Maybe we need to reduce it.
Yeah, that's more under conditions, right? But one thing that Dinwiddie did as well is you look at all three quarterbacks, and he confirmed that was his intent. He has three quarterbacks that he can coach almost exactly the same way, and he expects almost exactly the same thing from them. Now, admittedly, Arbuckle's not fleet of foot like the other two quarterbacks, but the mentality required to execute the game that Dinwiddie likes to execute, all three understand what it is. Miller develops them and makes sure they understand what they're going to do, and they make it easy to make those quarterbacks interchangeable. Again, I repeat, that's the weakness that Winnipeg had. They didn't have enough faith in their third guy like Toronto did. I don't even know. Like the third guy was Arbuckle, and they brought him into the Grey Cup, right? Because I think it's fair to assume that the guy that took over when Kelly couldn't come back, Dukes, was their number two guy at that point.
Yeah, I believe so too. I just think that the way Dukes played throughout, because he had a good start to the season, but then July came and he kind of hit a wall to where that's where it's kind of like Is the trust really there? Is it there? I'm interested to see what happens next year if Nick wants to come back or if there's a team out there. Because I think about it, between what's going on in Montreal, the Vernon Adams presuming trade coming soon, it's going to be interesting to see what happens, because if Arbuckle leaves, I think there's a chance we get the same quarterback room that was here in 2023, where you have Kelly at 1, Dukes 2, and then Scott's the 3rd.
David, if Kelly doesn't leave, Arbuckle's not staying. I don't think both of them can be in the same under the same contract agreement, right? Cap.
Like for next year or for this year?
Next year. This year just went by, right? You
It
think
all
they can
depends.
financially bring them both in? I mean, Kelly would
I
have to
think
take
so.
a heck of a haircut.
But I don't think Nick Arbuckle is going to be looking to make that much money either if he knows he's a backup. Like Dinwiddie, when he was talking about it, he's talking as a guy who, yeah, he'll get backup money, but like 1B money, like almost like if you like, let's say Calgary were to go and offer him a deal. That's in the fact that PJ Walker's is there, but he's not. They need someone else to compete with him.
Yeah,
it's almost like Matthew Schultz, like Nick Arbuckle is Matthew Schultz right now. He can start some games, but to have him be the full out starting quarterback, unlikely. So
You don't think the fact that he won the Grey Cup means anything?
It means something, but we've seen players come in and play in a Grey Cup. They go and they get the big deal, and then it's not the same. But like the reason why I think that too is he likes the situation in Toronto, and he's probably thinking a team might offer me the money, but will the situation be right for me? So I think it's going to be money that will make that decision.
That's I think ultimately. Griff, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say too, the little nugget I think that's very important on this as well is Dinwiddie publicly saying he's got a spot on my coaching staff whenever he decides to hang his cleats up as well. So that's something that he may keep in mind throughout this process. You know, hey, I can still be a backup, mentor the young guys, get those reps in, you know, because here's the other thing too. We don't know if Chad's going to be ready by not.
Well, like, they say he's going to be ready.
They say he's going to be ready, but you don't know if, like, you know, physically, mentally be able to get onto a football field. So I'm just saying that just because, you know, we don't, I think we'll get a clearer answer probably in the new year, but there's that chance there that, hey, you may be required to play a couple games or even still learn, like I said earlier, work with the guys in practice, but then also too, get that like coaching experience, like maybe work with like Mike Miller to be like, hey, how do you view the quarterback from a coach's point of view? You know,
I think also there could be a repeat of last year. You know, he was looking for a job in February, contemplating whether he was going to retire or whether he wanted to be a coach. I think he'll get signed early or late, anywhere from early to late. And if a team offers him enough money, and we know that Dinwiddie's not a vindictive person. He had Arbuckle, he sent Arbuckle away and then brought him back. So, you know, we know that Arbuckle's he's not gonna piss off Dinwiddie by signing somewhere else.
No.
You know, he's not Dinwiddie's not that kind of guy. He'll take him as a coach after his career's over. He goes somewhere else and goes, you know what? I won a Grey Cup. You know, that makes it a lot easier to retire, having won the Grey Cup. You know how many players wish they could win a Grey Cup before they retire? That's that's you know, on top. That's the number one thing on the bucket list in your football career: winning a championship.
Well, only that he winning the MVP too. He can ride that pretty good too.
Yeah,
and you think also about, you know, his age, right? 31. There's still years left in him.
Oh, absolutely. At least 7.
People were wondering if he was going to retire this year, and he's like, I couldn't fathom the idea of retiring because I still believed I had football in me. It's just I needed a team to see that.
Well, they're all watching it now. I mean, the question is, and it's always the same question, guys, for the quarterbacks that haven't won a Grey Cup, the great quarterbacks that haven't won a Grey Cup, it always hangs at, can they win a Grey Cup? That's the major question, right? We know, can he be a good quarterback? Yeah, there's tons. There's a few. Can they be a great quarterback? Yeah, there's a whole bunch. But the exclusive group of quarterbacks that win a Grey Cup, that's a little more exclusive.
something that like Cody Fajardo was going after for a while, something now
Absolutely. Perfect example, Griff.
Yeah, and something that now Vernon Adams and Trevor Harris are trying to get to as well.
Right. They're on the other side of the equation there.
I mean,
sorry to cut you off. I just want to say one more thing with Arbuckle. Is Ottawa a potential destination for him?
No, I like Drew Brown there. I think that guy.
I don't even think it's because of Drew Brown. I just think two reasons. One, he's already been in that organization. It didn't go well for him. Sometimes you just he's a backup. Drew Brown is the starter there, as Frank said. Like that's to me, if he's like if I'm looking at teams I might consider it. Calgary is one because they're not right. Saskatchewan could look at it too, right? Because we don't know what's going on with Trevor Harris there, and apparently they're not going to be trading for Vernon Adams, according to the GM there. Okay, sure, fine. Don't go for an MLP caliber quarterback. So there are teams right now that you also wonder how many teams will want to continue the carousel of quarterbacks moving around the league and maybe look in other directions. We talked about this many times before.
Absolutely. The Adams thing, I think, is more about not showing interest in him to ensure that you don't have to overpay for him.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right. And every GM has an excuse to say, well, I don't know if he's a starting quarterback. I don't know if I could trade for a starting quarterback. I'm trading for a guy who could be a starting quarterback. I mean, it's not like he was your starting quarterback all year, that kind of stuff. Right. It's logical. I mean, the teams that are going to trade for him are going to play down his numbers as much as they can, just as BC will play them up. But I think playing them down will carry a lot further because the fact is that Adams, while he got back the starting job, he only got it back because the other guy really didn't play well at all.
Yeah. BC's a very intriguing team for next year because they were a team like, hey, you're hosting the Grey Cup. You should be going to the Grey Cup. They had such a roller coaster start to the year.
Absolutely.
They weren't exactly, I know they almost beat Toronto in that week 1 game, but there was nothing in that game that made me look and go, wow, this is a legitimate contender. Now, new head coach, new general manager. I wonder with them, obviously, Rourke's going to be the starter. And also with Ottawa, it was just a question because of, I think Jeremiah Masoli is going to be another guy. I don't think he's going to go back to Ottawa either because, he might try to go somewhere to compete. The end of the day, just going back to BC, though, so two things. With BC, it's just interesting now because it's what are you going to be and what are your expectations going to be?
Oh, yeah.
And with the quarterback carousel, it's what's happening here. Who's going to end up where? Because if you think about it, I would say the only ones that are for sures are Toronto, Montreal, Hamilton, I guess Ottawa now, like you guys were saying, Winnipeg, and Edmonton. That leaves only 3 teams. BC.
I'd take Winnipeg off that list.
Yeah, you know what? Yeah, I would take them off that list too. Now that I think about it, because
the for sure thing.
Yeah,
the good bet is that Claros comes back, but that's not a for sure thing in my mind.
No, because he's what 36, 35.
Yeah, he's got a lot to prove, but they ran. At some point, a change happens only because you can't keep running the same thing out there.
Yeah. That's more it for me. It's the fact that you can't keep you can't rinse, repeat, recycle because we know they're probably going to run it back a lot, but they're going to be, I know they've lost 3 in a row, but I feel like they're under more pressure now because guess who's hosting the Grey Cup next year? It's the Blue Bombers.
Oh boy.
Yeah, they got a real question. Do they go for it again or do they realize we need to consider I for me, the Claros is not even really the problem. I know a lot of people want to point to him as the problem, but it's not him.
If there's a team, David, that could afford 2 really good quarterbacks higher paid, it would be Winnipeg because the cap is, that bandage has been pulled off. Every team that hosts the Grey Cup in recent memory have gone over the cap a fair amount because they want to represent.
That's not. Yeah, you're not wrong about that. Also, what's Chris Streveler's status? Are they going to look, is that a chapter you're going to close as well? That's something they're going to have to consider too. Yeah, they got to figure some internal things out before they even consider bringing other quarterbacks in too.
Yeah, it's just like they're set on every other side too, but eventually they're gonna have to rip the Band-Aid off and realize, hey, we are who we are. I understand going for it. I understand this year. I understand going for it, but I just feel like there's going to be so much pressure because you've lost 3 in a row. You were this, you were that, and now I know we were asking about Toronto to go back to back, but Toronto could be. I know, and I know Winnipeg went back to back, but I believe a team hasn't truly gone back to back in years, consistent, like where it was like true
since Montreal.
Since Montreal, and that was almost 15 years ago now. So there's a lot of added pressure too, because when you look at the league next year, the only team I could really say they're probably not going to be in Winnipeg come next November would be Calgary, and probably maybe Edmonton. I don't know yet. I'm just waiting to see what they do in the offseason, but that's just that. I only say that because you don't know where the CFL can go, because you have to assume certain teams are going to be back. You have to assume Hamilton's not going to be as, I'll say, slow starting as they have been the last couple of years if they can stay healthy and be consistent and also get a defense that can actually stop the ball. So there's so many questions to be answered, and we just are at the bottom of it. It's just this offseason's an onion. We're gonna have to peel off a lot of layers until we find out, okay, what are these teams going to be, and what are the true expectations we should be putting on them for 2025?
Let me ask the both of you. Campbell's free now. I mean, there's a opening in Edmonton for a head coach.
It seems likely. I would say he is the top candidate for that job.
I think it's pretty much up to him whether he wants to go there or not. I think he's going to basically tell them either, yes, I'll take the job and be the coach, or no, thanks.
Well, the GM's already there.
Yeah.
Right. And so the GM position isn't he was working on being a GM in BC, much like a few other coaches, GMs, and I know in this group we think it's a bad idea to have the same person be both positions, even though the cap kind of forces you to contemplate it, right?
Yep.
Oh, for sure. I also just think that when you look at teams, right, in terms of the we talked to Ryan Dinwiddie about the prospect of being a GM and a coach. He says he wouldn't be able to do both. Right now, you look at who's there, who is back in Edmonton. H.E.R. Who has H.E.R. worked with in the past? Right, I know that it was Chris Jones, I believe, was the coach when he won in 2015. But like I don't think Rick Campbell would be out of the realm of possibility to go there. Like I think
if they can, that vice president thing that some GMs do, the vice president and then give away a little bit of the GM power.
I think they would give Rick Campbell a little bit of would give him a bit of a role, but I don't think would it be like a GM? Could possibly be.
I think it's very possible.
But I'm trying to remember. I don't think so. I don't think Hervey and H.E.R. and Rick Campbell ever worked together. But if you wanted, the thing that Edmonton's got to figure out is just get back to respectability, right? This is a franchise that needs, but if they bring in those guys, maybe that's obviously going to be a step in the right direction, but it's going to take more than just a coach and a GM, right? There's going to be a lot of work to do. It'd be interesting to see how they view the rest of the roster too, right? If Rick Campbell does these interviews, what do you think about Trey Ford? What do you think about
Javon Leake?
Well, I think Javon Leake. I think if you're your team, you're keeping Javon Leake. Like he is. Like they've got pieces on the roster. How much can we salvage from what's already here instead of having a brand, totally build new?
Don't forget, they're in the business of trying to sell hope, right? Because that's what Edmonton lacks the most, right? Is sincere hope, and I think bringing Campbell in, he's a I think he's a sellable thing. His success in Ottawa that brought him to BC. He's had a bit of success in BC. Is there a head coach? Are they going to go with old versions of new coaches, old versions of new coaches, or new coaches who are old versions? I don't know. Recycled coaches. Are they going to go with that? Or are they going to go with the trend that we've seen recently, where we've seen head coaches with very little experience as head coaches, not just coaching, but winning Grey Cups? And ultimately, that's what Edmonton wants, right? That's what the organization wants. That's what the fans want. And ultimately, that is the only answer and the only hope that they're hoping, right? They're not just hoping for respectability.
They also have I think the third longest drought right now. Next year will be 10 years since they last won with Mike Riley. So if next year with Edmonton, if they can have a season where they go 9-9, 8-10, 10-8, somewhere in that range, they basically need to be this year's Ottawa Red Blacks. Win some games you're not supposed to, commend a lot of respect, and then 2026 is the year where you say, hey, our rivals down south are hosting the Grey Cup. Wouldn't it be fun to get there? I'm not trying to say Ottawa is going to be the team in 2025. I'm just saying for Edmonton, and also the fact too that they're trying to host a Grey Cup. That's the other wrinkle to this as well. If you're trying to host it, you don't want to put a bad product on the field. No, you want to have your team be the one that gets to the game.
That's again hope that you can represent while the cup is in your town.
Give the fans that sense of optimism.
David?
Yeah, well, for Edmonton, you can only go upwards. Like I think they needed to part ways with Chris Jones. They needed to do that. They're gonna have to make this. Ed Hervey's gonna have to figure out if any of the guys that are there right now are worth keeping around. He's looking at this. He probably knows a lot about Edmonton. Sometimes you prefer to get the things done earlier, but obviously Ed Hervey wasn't available until now. I think he should never have left in the first place. Let's also put that out there too. Like, I don't know why.
Well, there was some things that he did. There was some bad press that he received.
Yeah.
He left because some stuff went bad, and unfortunately organizations have to make a stand sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they make a stand when they shouldn't. In his case, he's back, and he gets a restart, and good for him.
Yeah, no, I think it's they're in the right track. It's just someone's eventually gonna have to knock off Winnipeg. I thought BC was gonna do it this year. I thought maybe Saskatchewan could do it this year. And that's the problem there right now in the West. It's so tough. In the East, it's tough too, don't get me wrong. In the West, it's that much tougher when you have that extra team to really push for it, right? In the East, we're talking about Toronto, Montreal, and then whoever between Ottawa and Hamilton, right? This year, most years.
Let's be clear about something, Griff. The running game is better in the real cold. I don't want to start getting into the minutia here, but I'm gonna lay it out anyway. Brady Oliveira would play better in a game in Calgary or in Edmonton than he will in a place like Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal, or you know what I mean? Because the running game has a bigger advantage when it's cold, because you're more prone to go with the running game as opposed to passing.
Look what he did in the West Final. That's just perfect example. I think he was just on a mission. He wanted to go out there and show to everyone, hey, I'm running. I am running right to Vancouver. And then unfortunately it didn't get done. But the one thing too, I think we talked about this on my show, is if you look at all the Final Four teams, all of them had a running back you could depend on and call upon when it came time to it. And we saw and I know two people in the Grey Cup were like saying Toronto's got to have three running backs, but at the end of the day, it all goes through Kadeem Carey.
But again, the attitude that the Argos have under Ryan Dinwiddie is they don't mind spreading things out, giving everybody a chance. Who did Winnipeg go to in that game other than Oliveira?
Ontario Wilson.
And how often did they go to him?
They went to him more than Kenny Lawler in the Grey Cup.
Kenny Lawler had one catch.
I meant the running part. I agree with you. I'm talking about running the ball. The whole point is that one thing I got to say again, I'll repeat, is about the way you allow every player or as many as you can to be involved that are on the bench and on the sideline. The Argos do that. And they don't Attaboye played a little bit, not as much as I'd hope he'd played, but they give everybody a chance to prove they should stay in. That's what I like about the way Dinwiddie coaches.
Yeah, I mean, there's a balance. There is a balanced approach you need to have, and I've criticized Dinwiddie about bailing on the run so early in favor of the pass, and that's when the Argos get into trouble. But teams know if you cut off one part of their offense, you force them to beat you a different way, and the teams that have succeeded have that balance. It's very rarely that a team that doesn't have a credible run game makes it far.
Yeah, you need the running game.
Besides Winton McManus, is Kadeem Carey the most important free agent signing to try to retain this offseason?
No, it's Win McManus.
No, besides Winton.
Oh, sorry, beside Win? No, what? He's crew. You got to be careful how much you pay running backs. They've already put a lot of money into Dan Attaboye and Deonta McMahon. Well, I don't think McMahon actually has an expensive deal. That if you're looking to bring Win back, I don't know if you can bring Carey back. If you bring Win back, can you bring back Coxie? Right? You got to start looking. You like your running game the way it is, but you can't be putting too much into it either.
Try this, Griff. The way that the Argos played in that game and won the championship, is there really anybody other than Winton McManus that played the kind of game that when it comes to contract time are not expendable?
Honestly, no. He on the field, off the field is what you need and what you want in a consummate pro. So that's why I think re-signing, the man with the toothpick and the dreadlocks, number 48, you gotta lock him up, because not only do you know that he's a great player on the field, off the field, he's someone that will keep everyone in line when times are good and when times are bad.
Yeah, I mean they're a different team when he's on the field versus when he's not on the field.
We saw it this year when he was hurt.
Yeah,
right. So it's you're not wrong on that, Griff.
And if people didn't understand the point I'm trying to make is they have a plethora of receivers. I'm not saying any of them are expendable per se, but what I'm saying is if one of them disappears, it's not like they're going to lose a key receiver. The Argos have proven that they can spread it around, which stands in good stead when it comes to contract time, because, like I said, no one did anything spectacular, although they've got a rookie, Polk, that I think they want to keep. I think if there's anybody in the receiving corps that they'd like to keep, I think it's him. And of course, their captain of receivers, Daniels. Those guys, Daniels for the reasons that you guys can all infer, and Polk for the reason that he's a young and up and comer.
I think Brissett's another good one to keep as well, just because Canadian, and if because Coxie is a guy I can see leaving. He look, very good talent, but at the end of the day, it is a numbers game. But Coxie, I see in that situation where like Jamal Peters was last year, where it's like he's very good, but that if he were to go, it's going to be next man up to replace him. You can fit, Kevin Mittal, Mackay Polk, Dejon Brissett in that role, or even Jake Herslow.
Absolutely. They've got their eyes on him. David, we heard that specifically from the coach.
Yeah, we did. And you also have to think of any guys that are going to get NFL opportunities. Can Mackay Polk get a look in the NFL? Right? Those are things you're going to have to look. The next few months, you're going to be seeing a lot of that type of stuff coming out as
Winton
well.
Potentially too. I think he's old. I know he's older, but is there a team that kind of like knocks on that door?
He might be a coffee candidate, a cup of coffee candidate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of players that go down there and they end up with only a cup of coffee, and it's not because they're not good enough to play, in the NFL. I think it's more or less,
game.
Yeah, and I think if I was a CFL player who was a star somewhere, and I go up to the NFL, it's like the quarterbacks, right? They hand you the clipboard. Some people just want to play. That some players just want to play, and I happen to think that when it comes to players that are older, a little more experienced, they might get a contract for a year or two, but that's about it. You know what I mean? And they make that decision: do I want to fight for that 1 or 2 year contract and not have fun? At the end of my career, I don't know. I'm not a football player. I wouldn't know for sure. I'm just inferring, I guess.
Yeah.
No, I completely understand.
No, for sure.
You got a topic you want to go with, David? I give you the floor.
No, I think we're getting the hook right now.
We're gonna get the hook any second, that's for sure. So the game, if you looked at the game itself as sort of a projection to next year, this is the question I have. What we heard from the Argos, every player, every coach that spoke, Pinball Clemens, the ownership, the boss of the MLSC, they all had one common theme. Argo fans, show up. Toronto, we got great football. Come out. We're going to do the best we can to entertain you. Come out. Does that sound familiar to you guys?
Yeah, I heard it all. I've heard it all before.
Yeah, because this year, we got to be honest, up until the CNE game, attendance was quite sparse. And then the X came around, and that's when they were starting to get over 15,000 on a regular. If they could be pushing close to 20 for every game this year, that's going to be more of a win. That's also me being very optimistic. But even if they can get 16 to 17 consistently, I think that's a push in the right direction. I was also thinking about this year too with the Argos. I just think they have to come out of the gates hot next year where, just not do like 2023 and go 16-2. But if they can win 12, 13, 14 games, you're going to build a solid fan base.
And not start their year with their face of the organization in a kettle of hot soup, right? And there were a lot of people who resented the fact that Kelly was kept by the Argos, and that doesn't help sell tickets.
There's a lot of I've even been seeing people online there's some people that were just being really rude and saying like what happened in Montreal was karma for what you did in the offseason. And then there was everyone saying like, remember, like when after Toronto won, there was Winnipeg fans really going like, remember Toronto still keeps employed a man who did this, and people who covered it up, where it's just like, look, he learned from his mistakes. You got to move on from it, but you got to know too, you're on thin ice, and just keep a positive image to attract fans. Because I even saw 2 Ottawa fans basically posting that they didn't want to come to Toronto because they didn't want to give their money to the organization that employs Kelly. So if Chad Kelly can just stay out of the limelight, rehab, and get better, you're going to draw fans. But there's going to be a subsection of the CFL world that is going to resent him.
David, give you the closing comment.
Yeah, they got to find a way to get the fan base more engage a different fans that have not been going to games. They got to find a way. There's people paid a lot more money than us. They'll have to figure that out. But at least Keith Pelly is going to push for it. So he's got the passion for it.
There's one more thing I just want to say, and that's just with scheduling. I would do more afternoon games on the weekends as opposed to like how the home opener last year was on a Sunday night. I would do more like 3 or 4 o'clock kickoffs as opposed to like 7 o'clock all the time.
Oh, you just mentioned something that will lead to a long conversation, but I'll make it as brief as I can. There's a lot of talk in the Eastern Division that it's to their advantage to play those afternoon games. I'll leave it at that. And so there might be a temptation. There's some GMs that are thinking now in the East that it's not a bad idea to play in the afternoon. It creates a disadvantage, for the Western teams. Anyway,
we have to go now.
Yeah, we're getting pulled.
For Griff and of course for David, I'm Candid Frank. Thank you for watching. This, of course, CFL Talk, seen Mondays at 4 p.m. We had a special today. This show can also be heard on the Spanglish World Radio Network. For CFL Talk, news, entertainment, and other sports programming we offer, please check out SpanglishWorld.ca. Spanglish World. Watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. Thanks for watching, and don't forget Candid Frank Stanisci, 10:30 on YouTube. Until next time.